Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
This week, we're going to get into that one scene from Breakfast Club.
Let's dive on in.
Cheers!
Alright everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see /hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that... What, is it the pointing?
Yeah.
People find good media. Sorry.
You tell them.
I know.
You got it.
Yeah, so let's talk about this scene from Breakfast Club. This is another one of your real early ideas for the festival. What is it about this scene from the Breakfast Club?
Wow. There's a lot. You know, I mean, this is a 20-minute scene, probably the last major scene in the movie.
Yes.
And it's really, gosh, it's basically the whole movie wrapped up into one scene.
Right. It's a just dialogue scene. I mean, most of this movie is just dialogue.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but this one in particular is we slow way down from a lot of the early jokes and kind of back and forth stuff
they've already
that's happening.
Gone through the getting to know you stuff, right?
Or at least with the walls up. Get to know you with the walls up.
They've done stuff. They've smoked weed. They've danced, and you know, in 2s and 3s they've done things. But this is the first time that they've had a real conversation together.
Yeah, and this is, as you said, right after they got the weed out of Johnson's pants.
Yeah, this is after that for sure.
And they smoke it. And then they're kind of dancing around and they do their whole thing, and then this is the come down.
Yeah, and this is kind of like the after stoned, I guess. I'm not sure. They're all kind of doing their own thing, but they all kind of, they're stuck in this place together, right? That's the beauty of this. Like, this could be a play.
Right.
Like, I'm actually surprised it's not a play.
I'm sure it's probably been performed
I
as
hope
a
so.
play.
I hope so, because it's a brilliant
too.
thing, but it's the essence of the movie, and it really shows who their real selves are and how they are in their different roles, whether it's the brain, the athlete, the basket case, the princess, and the criminal.
Yeah, that's it. You got them all right. Yes, you did.
But it's all within the perception of school, right?
Yes.
And like the different there's class warfare here, and guess what? Like, this stuff is political, and we get into some of these things, and they've all, like I said, bonded in their own individual ways. But this group therapy session that they have together is some of John Hughes' best writing ever.
Oh, easily. Well, and really, the only one who doesn't do much divulging, mainly because I think that he's been
Bender.
An open book since the very beginning, right? I mean, he is
raw.
He is a raw nerve ending from moment one of this movie, and so there isn't a lot. I mean, really, all he can do is become more tender, which we see towards the very, very, very end.
But
we get a little bit of that.
I agree with you, and like we had the scene earlier of him talking about, you know, getting the cigar, putting out on his arm.
Yeah, that's what happens when you spill paint in the garage.
Like, he's an open book. Like, he's going to let you know who he is and where he comes from and why he feels the way he does.
And I'm glad that we have one character that doesn't fully empty out. I mean, really...
He's an all-time movie asshole, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, and
he's so good.
And I think Ali Sheedy's character, she divulges somewhat, but she also holds back. Now, I will say this scene has a... you know, what I do for work, like working with young people and working in the arts, I have quoted Ali Sheedy's line from this numerous times in speeches at work. Not speeches like to my coworkers, but like getting up at events and talking, and it's...
So you don't just stand up and make speeches at work? Like,
I stand on my desk.
Hello, everybody.
I stand on my desk.
I have a speech to make.
Yes. I held my talking stick. No, when you get older, your heart dies. That's very much a thing.
I wrote that down.
That teenagers... Sure. I remember feeling that way. I completely remember feeling that way, and I think it's a very real fear, right?
This scene comes down to just absolutely honest, wonderful writing, and also the culmination of these performances too, because they all take on their own roles here. This is a group of actors that hadn't really done a lot before this, including Emilio Estevez. Maybe Ali Sheedy's done a few things, but all of them, this is really, I guess if anyone, it's Molly Ringwald probably.
Yeah, but it's still super early in all of their careers.
Totally. And, you know, rarely do you see this much naked emotion in any character you see in a movie, let alone teenager.
Everybody's doing amazing work here, obviously, as we've already said.
Super important, like, roles for their careers,
too,
right?
Definitely. But I think of somebody like Anthony Michael Hall, even in other John Hughes movies, the idea of the nerd is this joke. It's a throwaway joke, and it's almost like Hughes was doing his mea culpa.
I mean, he's writing from personal experience.
Oh, completely.
From this movie. He has to be, right?
Yeah, definitely. But I think that this mea culpa of, like, sorry I've been picking on the nerds, here is a fully fleshed out character that even in the beginning of this movie is a punchline.
Yeah, but you're right. It's one of his few where they take the nerd, like, actually consider his real feelings.
And
suicidal thoughts.
His nuance of when he's laughing and he has tears running down his face and he's laughing and he's like, oh my God, and he's like, Claire, you're so conceited, but he's laughing about it. He's like, you're so conceited, like, how do you not see? but I just think it's like being that smart to be able to be like, oh dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. I understand that you think you're miserable.
You live in this warped world.
Yeah, and the heavy lifting that this young actor is doing in this scene, it's like I want a whole epic saga of Brian Johnson from you know, teen dork.
You want his origin story?
Yeah, well, and I want to see where he goes when he goes and him and his other dork friends.
It ended up being Superbad is actually his origin story.
Dude, they ended up being Bill Gates. I think they ended up being like they and their other nerd friends went and built computers in their mom's garage, and they're multi-bajillionaires now. I hope that's who Brian Johnson is now, right? But it's like that character is just so fully actualized, and I think when we were younger we look at Bender and we lock in on that, but now that I'm in my 40s I look at
100%.
Brian and I'm like, so fascinating.
Well, I think Bender is attractive because he's funny, right? Like he's a funny guy. He's the cool, edgy guy that you kind of wish you were in high school, right?
Dude, in junior high made so many wannabe Bender like outfits where I'm like, so this is the flannel with the cut off.
I've seen pictures.
Levi vest over the outside of it. Yes. Fingerless gloves in the middle of July.
Exactly, and you know he obviously is the real deal or whatever you want to call it. But he is someone that you, when you're younger, it's also just a really funny movie, right? Like he's hilarious in this movie.
Yeah, well, everybody is. Everybody in their own way. Like Ali Sheedy gets off some cracking one-liners in this scene. This whole thing of like, I'm not a nymphomaniac. I'm a compulsive liar, right? But even Brian's coming in there where he's like, of course she's crazy. She has a shrink, right? Which is like
she's sleeping with her shrink.
Or she's sleeping with her shrink.
Yeah.
But it's like just 15-year-old logic, and like
totally,
it's also brilliantly done.
But it's a movie that I felt like I watched this movie recently, and it's the one that like it's just the culmination of the movie. It's an important scene that you need to talk about, and strangely, over the 14 years that we've been doing this show, we have never discussed The Breakfast Club.
I know.
Maybe in a top 5 or something.
Yeah.
But we have never fully discussed
I did do that homage for John Hughes
after he
passed. But you know, this idea of, my God, are we going to become our parents?
I was just going to say that.
Oh, it is so...
Well, that's definitely a theme through a lot of this, right? And like hating your parents is a trend, and you know, Bender does have the smoke up Johnny part. That's probably the most open he's been, but he's still just such an asshole.
Yeah, he does not give much in like, this scene.
As much as it's a little justifying to see Claire kind of become weak for a minute,
put her in her place a little bit.
It's definitely forced upon her, and he is, you know, he pokes and prods as much as possible.
I also feel like we kind of see some of those scenes through a very different lens, and you know, a lot has been talked about this. Molly Ringwald herself has talked a lot about this. I don't know if you've read some of her essays that she's written in the last couple of years about her career. She has a teenage daughter who is, you know, is kind of going back through her career and being like, God, Mom, like, this is not how kids talk, with a lot of movies that she did.
Yeah.
And, you know, and she's going back and watching things like 16 Candles and going, oh, that was a date rape scene, right? Like, that's fucked up. Like, how do I explain that to my daughter, right? And she's written these fantastic essays about it. And you know, she's like, look, I feel really bad that John isn't around to have some of the nuanced conversations that are happening right now about sexuality and gender and all these things that have kind of thrown some of his movies into a little bit of bad light in terms of how they've aged. Mm-hmm. And she's like, and I feel that way too. Like, yes, was he the sort of voice of that generation? Completely. But totally. At the same time, like, she's like, do I look at some of that stuff and go, yeah, that was a little tone deaf, or this part was bad and that part was bad, all this stuff. What else is... I mean, nothing from the 80s is going to age that good.
Totally. And
you know,
I mean,
today.
This is a random example, but like, I watched Zoolander for the first time in 10 years yesterday, and I was like, oh shit, there's some shit in here that definitely couldn't be made today.
No, completely.
And it's the same thing with the 80s, you know, people are tone deaf, the world evolves socially and accepting more
I mean,
more things.
Exactly. Like, nowadays, more unique voices are able to tell stories, which means that there is a much more leveled out playing, not that it's very leveled out, but it's a more leveled out playing field than it was in the 80s, of people being able to say, like, don't say that shit, man. Sure. Like, what the hell is this? But I think that overall, like what these characters are talking about, I mean, my God, Emilio Estevez. It comes
down to pressure, right? It comes down to pressure from your parents, for your grades, socially, sexually, you name it.
And that's all still happening today. Like, those things have definitely not changed. They've maybe mutated and they look and sound different.
Yep. But
are they still there? Completely. And could you make a Breakfast Club in 2021 and have it be, like, absolutely enthralling? Of course. We saw echoes of that even in something like Booksmart, where it's like, the pressure is still there, the backstabbing is still there, the insecurities are still there. They just look and sound a little bit different.
Do you hope they remake this movie?
I would actually, if somebody did it and did a really good job, this is something I would actually like to see be, maybe not remade, but completely reimagined. Like, who are those archetypes, those high school archetypes now? I would love to see that. And I think if we had somebody that had the right heart and vision to be able to do the funny stuff and then do a scene like this, which, by the way, I have to say, the direction in this scene, you talk about it being able to be a play, but the direction, when Emilio Estevez's character is telling his story and the camera is moving slowly around those pillars, where for 20 seconds...
It's a 20-minute scene.
We don't even see anyone's faces. We just hear his voice as he's really, like, diving into this. And then when it comes back around and we see his face again, Estevez is acting the fuck out of this scene. And
awesome.
it is
I wish he was in
so
more
magnetic.
Yeah.
Oh, I do too. But just a brilliant scene. We need more scenes like this in movies. And I would say
agree.
That's, you know, we talk about this idea of, like, have we seen this before? And I would say not enough, especially in comedies. If we could slow down, and not 40-year-old virgin comedies, but I think, like, comedies that do understand how to take their time and are more about character development, I would love to slow down enough to have more scenes like this in those movies where this thing is, like, written by Aaron Sorkin and directed by David Mamet. Like, it is incredible in the way that it's done, and this is like a teen comedy.
Yeah.
And yet, the depth of character development is amazing.
You would think of something like Stranger Things that pulls so much from the 80s would have that one scene in Stranger Things where all the kids sit around and have this 20-minute conversation about all the shit.
Yeah, well, it's
monsters chasing them. So
it's heightened. I also think there's the actual 80s, and then there's what the 80s look like through the 3D glasses of people that grew up in the 90s.
Yeah, that's
and I think that's kind of what Stranger Things actually is. I say that loving Stranger Things, but I'm there was way more wood paneling in the 80s than there is in this. This is some... This is a little more like video game 80s.
It's a brilliant scene and an important scene, and honestly, just heartbreaking, funny, like ending out with Brian wanting to kill himself.
Ahead of its time. Taking a gun to school, talking about that in the 80s, like, that is prescient, unfortunately, but it is prescient.
And then flipping it as, like, hey, he tried to kill himself with a flare gun.
It somehow becomes funny. Like,
they
go
full circle.
What a fucking dismount that is.
I agree. They go full circle, and just the question that they start this whole scene with of what would you do for $1 million, right? And they go around, and that's kind of how the whole thing starts, and it breaks open this dam of emotion that none of them are ready for. And maybe it's because they're a little stoned, and maybe it's because they're tired of this day or whatever.
Well, and every time that you think that it's going to come down to a simple idea and that all of them are going to agree, the landscape shifts again, and there's more infighting. And I love that it manages to simmer out into like, yeah, we all are kids, and this is really hard. And then it's like, but fuck you. And then it's like, but fuck you. And like, and the tension keeps building and then settling and then building and settling. Just a brilliant, like that's got to be like such a good feeling to be able to direct a scene like that.
Such an amazing scene. All right, that's it for this episode. Please like and subscribe if you liked what you see/hear. We'd love to grow this channel and this new segment we're really excited about and feel like they're going awesome. So continue to subscribe if you like this stuff, and we will see you next week.
Bye, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.